Okay, ladies and gentlemen. I must need more coffee or something. Okay, today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to continue with our polar bears story. So, polar bears are patient. Polar bears are patient. Polar bears are very patient hunters. Their main diet is the ringed seal, which is the most numerous seal in the Arctic. They can smell a seal's breathing hole in the ice. Then they wait silently until the seal surfaces at that particular hole. This can take a very long time, since each seal has 10 or even 15 different holes to choose from. Sooner or later, the seal returns and the giant bear grabs him. Polar bears are hungry. Polar bears like to eat only the blubber and skin of the seal and usually leave the meat, which is in turn scavenged by Arctic foxes. A bear can eat 100 pounds of seal fat at a single sitting. Polar bears need to catch about one seal a week in order to stay strong and healthy. When the opportunity presents itself, which is rarely, polar bears will even hunt walruses and beluga whales. Polar bears are tough. Polar bears are masters when it comes to enduring blizzards and cold weather. They have lots of warm fur, even on the bottoms of their feet. But equally important is their 4-inch layer of blubber. With this combination of fur and blubber, almost no heat escapes from their body. Even when the Arctic temperature drops to minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit, a polar bear's body temperature stays at a steady 98.6 degrees, the same as ours. Their compact ears are very short tail further prevent heat loss. Polar bears are fast. No other four-legged animal can swim as fast as the polar bear. They swim at a rate of 6 miles per hour. That's quite a bit faster than they generally walk. They can do this because of their dinner plate size front paws, which are webbed and work like paddles. They use their hind legs only to steer. Their great swimming ability gives them their Latin name, Ursus maritimus, which means sea bear. They are also good divers and can see well underwater. Polar bears are few. Altogether, there are only 20,000 to 25,000 polar bears in the world. These are separated into 19 groupings, which are called subpopulations. Most polar bears are about 15,000, live in Canadian territory. About 4,000 live in northern Alaska in two separate groups. There are no polar bears in the middle or southern part of Alaska. Polar bears are endangered. For tens of thousands of years, polar bears were the undisputed rulers of the far north. But now their existence is in jeopardy. Climate change is their single greatest threat. When the sea ice breaks up and melts earlier and earlier each spring, the bears find it increasingly difficult or impossible to catch seals. The result has been that in certain regions, fewer baby bears are surviving since their mothers are not as well nourished. Pollution and the disturbance caused by northern oil rigs and exploration for oil are additional threats. The United States Department of the Interior declared the polar bear a threatened species, the first animal added to the endangered species list because of global warming. More facts about polar bears. Of the 8 species of bears in the world, the polar bear is the most recent, having evolved from the brown bear just 200,000 years ago. It is ironic that this most recent bear may become the first to disappear. Although the polar bear population today is currently healthy, its future is in grave peril due to global warming. 1/3 of all polar bears may be gone in the next 45 years as the Arctic ice melts at an ever increasing rate. Hudson Bay's subpopulation of polar bears has already experienced a 22% decline from 1,200 bears in the 1980s to only 935 today. In Canada and Russia, more polar bears are seen on land, where they don't belong as the ocean's ice shrinks. This is causing conflict with humans. In 2006, some 180 bears came ashore around the remote Siberian town of Yankaram, necessitating that the patrols be organized to protect the villagers. In March 2008, a juvenile polar bear wandered inland more than 250 miles to the Alaskan village of Fort Yukon. No one in the village could remember having ever seen a polar bear in the area. In early April 2008, 3 polar bears walked 240 miles south of the Arctic coast to DeLine in Canada's Northwest Territories. They had no body fat and they were starving. Polar bears that have not resorted to coming ashore have to swim ever greater distances between ice floes. They can easily swim 15 or even 30 miles with no problem. But when the distance becomes 50 or more miles, especially when the seas are stormy, they are at risk of becoming exhausted and sometimes drowning. 4 were observed drowned in 2004. In August 2008, 9 polar bears were spotted swimming way off Alaska's northwest coast. Their fates were unknown. In May 2008, the United States Department of the Interior listed the polar bear as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. Also, the International Union for Conservation of Nature has added the polar bear to its red list. This is a start. If we want future generations to be able to experience the thrill of knowing that the polar bear is still alive and well and roaming the far north, we must take actions like this now. The following is a list of conservation organizations concerned for the future welfare of the polar bear: Bear Conservation Fund, Center for Biology Diversity, Defenders of Wildlife, International Fund for Animal Welfare, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the National Wildlife Federation, the Natural Resources Defense Council, Polar Bears International, and World Wildlife Fund. Author's note: I have always loved all forms of wildlife, and over the past 30 years have traveled to the 7 continents to observe and photograph many different species. As you would expect, polar bear photography involves dealing with some of the harshest weather anywhere. Most of my polar bear images were shot during late fall trips to Churchill on the western shore of Hudson Bay, a region known as the polar bear capital of the world. Hundreds of bears congregate along the shoreline, waiting for the ice to freeze so they can head out and hunt seal. On my first polar bear trip, a friend and I simply rented a pickup truck and drove around the frozen tundra looking for bears. This was not the most efficient way to get photographs, but it was certainly exciting. One polar bear came around the passenger side of the pickup and pounded on the windows with his paws. We had to drive away quickly. Another climbed onto the back of the truck as we watched from a safe distance. Temperatures fell below minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit with wind chill. Warm clothing was important, as good camera gear. I never could keep my fingers warm, and they often became so numb that I couldn't feel the shutter release button. On a subsequent visit, I went the traditional route and utilized the safe and comfortable tundra buggy from which to take pictures. These vehicles are half again as tall as a standing bear and move around the tundra on huge oversized tires. Not as exciting as a pickup truck, but much more practical for quality photography. There were certain pictures I could not obtain in the wild, so I returned to various zoos for help. I'm not a diver, and I don't even like cold water. I'm not Fortunately for me, some zoos have modern polar bear exhibits with large pools allowing for underwater observation. The bears don't play in the water all day, but after repeated visits to multiple zoos, I was able to obtain some excellent underwater imagery. And then there was Apun, an orphaned female polar bear cub who was rescued and brought for care to the zoo in my hometown of Anchorage, Alaska. She was barely 4 months old and weighed only 31 pounds when she arrived. She needed around the clock attention, but the small zoo didn't have enough professional staff for this at the time, so volunteers watched the little bear during the daytime. I spent several memorable days as a volunteer keeper, playing with the cub and at the same time taking advantage of the photo opportunity. I hope you enjoy seeing these photos as much as I enjoyed taking them.
Audrey Van, your ride is here. You need to go outside. Audrey Van.